morning. Good morning, everyone. Sorry, I'm a little late. I'm a little late to my own show. Imagine that. That would be me. Yeah, late. I'm going to be late. My dad used to say that I was going to be late to my own funeral. And I am hopeful that that is true, that I will be late to my own funeral. So here we are. Good morning. Good morning to everyone. I'm sorry, I'm a little discombobulated. Look at my beautiful earrings. They were made for me by Valentina Lapierre. She is a Blackfeet artist and dear, dear friend of mine who I love. I love with all my heart and have known for a long time. So I'm Robin Swan. Hello. I'm the creator and owner of Firebird Touch Therapy. We are a lifestyle company. One of the things we do is make cannabis medicines, and the other things we do, the more important thing that we do is empower you to become your true and authentic self. So although we are mostly at this present moment known in the cannabis industry, Firebird has had a wide wingspan of being in the world and participating on different levels. So I always like to start. Today we are going to be talking about something that's very important to all of us. Humans, because we're all one of them, right? Race, because we're all some kind of race. We're going to talk about the difference between race and culture, because there actually is one that's different between race and culture. And then our relations. You know, I'm being covered in spider webs right now. And how we relate to each other, because a lot of our relating is about dispersing. So part of my goal in my company is to create not only an avenue for you to find your true authentic self, but a container where we all can find a place to be together, grow, and evolve as a species of humans. But my guest this morning is Tiffany Bowden, Dr. Bowden, and I'm going to bring her on camera in just a second, but I want to kind of like set up what we're going to do and what we're going to talk about. And the first thing we always do is I'm going to offer up the sage for you. This is sage, white sage. It's growing right behind me. Cedar from the northwest, sweetgrass from the Rocky Mountains of Montana. Sweetgrass only grows in one place in the country, and that's the northwest quadrant of our country. And I'm going to just, I think we all need to get smudged. This whole world needs a smudge. So here, go ahead and take this smoke on. Take this. This is a really old owl eagle feather, and just want to give out a blessing to everybody out there today. It's going to be a really intense topic. We're going to push you to your edge, and we want to invite you to expand into the conversation. So that is our goal for today. Also, we always offer up tea because it's Tea for Tuesday, and this is a beautiful teapot that was given to me by my dear sister, Heidi Jaguar Eyes. And the first pouring is the pouring for the grandmothers, the grandfathers, your ancestors, my ancestors. Water is life. We call it mini wachosa. It means that it gives us all life. There is no life without water. And this morning, this conversation, we really need to have life in it. We really need to be fluid through it. So I'm going to offer up this water for all of you to take it exactly how you need it, because only you know how the Creator needs to participate in your life. Only you know what's going on in your world. So just take a moment, center down, realize that you are water, and step into the flow of yourself. Oh, and then that is for my beautiful grass. So now I'm going to introduce my friend, if I can figure out how to do it, Tiffany. We did this yesterday. Oh my God. It's always so challenging for me. There we go. Okay, I'm inviting Tiffany, Dr. Bowden, in right now. And, Jojo, my grandson is watching. Oh, I love him so much. He calls me Yaya, and he is so important to me. And he's the reason why, he is one of the reasons why I am doing this today. Okay, Tiffany, I just need you to come on. So we're going to talk about, Tiffany, Dr. Bowden here she comes. She's super fabulous. And so as she is coming on this morning, I have asked her to have this, here she comes. 6:00. Yay, good morning.
Good morning.
We did it. Good morning, Dr. Bowden.
I'm good. How are
you? So nice to see you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm good. So I wanted just to kind of express, well, let's introduce you first. Why don't you just go ahead and have a minute and just, Tell us how fabulous
Oh,
you actually
awesome.
are.
Thank you so much. But yeah, Tiffany Bowden, I have completed my PhD in communications with a specialization in diversity and inclusion. I am the founder and founding president of the Minority Cannabis Business Association. I have also been very active as a diversity consultant and a diversity trainer. So some of my clients have been Key Coco in the cannabis space. I've also worked with the National Diversity and Inclusion Cannabis Alliance as a part of their education committee, education director there. I've been the trainer for the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center, Procter& and Gamble, Amazon, Movember, a few others. So I've been in this space for probably over 20 years. So this is my passion area. I tend to come at it a little bit different from a lot of people who are in the diversity space and communication.
Oh, right on. Well, I'm super excited to have this conversation with you. Some people don't know I have my undergraduate degree is in race human relations. I graduated from Hebrew University, and my roommate was a woman who created a program called Ma'alot, which brought Arabs and Israelis together at a preschool level. And
Mm,
32 years later, nobody wants to go to war anymore, and they're having
so beautiful.
a really hard time getting kids to sign up for their mandatory army, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm really grateful that I've been in this conversation for a long time. And even though I present as a nice white girl, I get to move through the world with the cloak of white privilege just because I look like this. And I
Mm-hmm.
want to I want to say this up front because a lot of people are like, I'm not white, man.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Mexican, or I'm Indian, or blah blah blah. I'm this, I'm that. But you still look like
Mm-hmm.
a white person. Like my mother is Persian and North African, and my father is an indigenous member and citizen of the Eastern Band Cherokee Nation. So
Mm-hmm.
in my life, I have had the unique experience of experiencing racism externally, but not receiving it internally.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's a very, the color of us, the way that we move through the world truly matters. It doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
what matters on the inside of our pedigree, who we are, where we come from, is
Mm-hmm.
we're going to create some compassion, where
Mm-hmm.
we're going to create a level of empathy because we can see, okay, even though I have light skin and light eyes and I can enter in these ways, I have witnessed my mother was called a sand nigger my whole life. I didn't really
Mm-hmm.
know what
Mm-hmm.
that meant. I would have
Mm-hmm.
friends who were like, oh, yeah, you could play. And then they'd meet my parents and they'd be like, oh, well, maybe not. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
Sally is available anymore. And these are
Mm-hmm.
subtle messages that children receive that we don't understand what they're about. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
this is why I wanted to have you as my guest this morning
Mm-hmm.
to give a different perspective. And I want to speak more of like everyone gets very scared when you say Black Lives Matter. They say, well, all lives matter. Don't you know? They all matter.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they don't matter unless they
Mm-hmm.
all matter. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter because I had my beautiful assistant, Haley, put together this list of everyone who's Black who was killed by police in the
Mm-hmm.
last 2 years. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's epic. This is just this year. This is
Mm-hmm.
just where is it? It's 10 people. 10 people. Okay. 10
Mm-hmm.
people. 10 human beings have been killed by police that are Black people just since January. And in the last 2 years, not counting the 10 from this year, 26 people have been killed.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
these are all different ages. These are all different names. These are women. These are men. These are teenagers. So to say that there's not something wrong in our society, to say that we're equal and it's all about the effort that you put out into the world, that's what you receive, that is
Mm-hmm.
ludicrous.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's why I just wanted to speak with you. And I know that I saw your Facebook post last night. You were just speaking to Amazon, so you are a trained educator in how to have these conversations,
Mm-hmm.
with like skinheads and Black Panthers, and how to
Mm-hmm.
bring them together and find the unity in that. So
Mm-hmm.
can you maybe just give us a couple like how does that happen? How do you do that with
Yeah. So I think that
cannabis?
one thing that's like really important to understand is that human beings all have very similar goals and drivers. Like we all want to feel included. We all want to feel respected, loved, seen, These are things that are kind of unanimous things from all human beings. When we have these kind of violations and we feel like some of those things are being eclipsed, that's where you start to see the ego start to flash up. That's where you start to see us come from more of our primal senses and, more from our scarcity space rather than that abundant space. Once you're in that scarcity space, it causes you to go more tribalistic rather than thinking that your tribe is, all of humanity. You start kind of trying to keep all the resources for yourself and problematizing those who you think is making life more difficult for you or who is not shining a light on what your difficulties are. So, as an example, when we talk about white privilege, a lot of times the pushback is, from white people that I don't have white privilege. I've struggled, and it's kind of an offense that's taken to the term white privilege. And what I communicate to people is that, having white privilege, doesn't make you a bad person. It just means that you have a good opportunity to make the difference with the power that you have.
Oh.
And so for some white people, they don't necessarily see themselves as having power because they may be disadvantaged in some other way. So as an example, they may have class disadvantage. And that class disadvantage is something completely different from a race disadvantage. And that is something different from an ability disadvantage, like whether you're able-bodied or disabled. That's something different from, from sexuality or religion or English as first language, country of origin. So there's so many different quadrants of identity that when we're talking about white privilege, we are only talking about one aspect of that said identity. And, intersectionality is also being considered in that commentary. So it doesn't mean that you haven't struggled. It just means that you haven't struggled because you are white specifically.
It also means, I just have to speak on this. Okay. So Americans are really, all things are created equal. Nothing is created equal. I mean, just step outside, go check out the grass. Okay. You're not going to get a level playing field, even in the grass. So human beings are not created. They're not created equal. And when you're born into a situation that is starting from survival because you just immediately have less, you are already in survival mode. And as you grow up, my partner is an African American man, and I can see the survival adaptability in him. And just something as simple. Last night we were in a public place, and he was looking all cute in my granddaughter's clothes that she had made, and I wanted him to take off his mask and take a picture, and he was freaking out that I wanted him to take off his mask. And he wasn't freaking out because he was afraid of the coronavirus. He was freaking out that we're in a place where there was security walking around and there were signs that say you have to wear a mask. And it put him in survival mode. It put him in a mindset that he was going to get in trouble, that he was going to get kicked out, that something was going to happen to him. But meanwhile, I'm like whipping my mask off and, drinking my drink and ha, 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 nothing's going to happen to me. And when I noticed how that simple thing just really affected him, it was so clear. I'm like, this is survival adaptability on every level. When you have grown up and I was raised on an off reservation. So there's when you were growing up in lack, when you were growing up with knowing that you are in danger just because of your skin. Nice Anglo people don't have conversations with their kindergarten or children before they send them out into the world about how to behave when the police see them. They don't have conversations with what to do when they're the ones that the trouble lands on just because they were in the mix. So there's nothing equal. And what I'm seeing in this movement, besides just so many other things, but the one thing I see is the lack of compassion for each other, the lack of empathy. Like, okay, my life, yeah, it's been hard. I grew up in a trailer park. My mom was a crackhead. My dad beat me. But, I'm still blonde. I still got blue eyes. I was still able to get that job. I was still able to, like get into whatever, as opposed to like same story, dark child, a little more melanated, then all of a sudden, oh, well, you're just like your parents. There's an author who, unfortunately, I cannot remember his name, and he's telling the story about how he was wrongly incarcerated, and in jail, he came to the point of understanding that his mission in life was to educate
Mhm.
the difference and the lack of balance. So
Mhm.
how can we as Anglos really make this movement, because we all need to do it. Like if we're going to, again, I'm going to keep going to this list. We're going to put it in the feed. You know, you need to see the names of these people.
Mhm.
37 people dead in 2 years, just literally just because the color of their skin. So
Mhm.
it's not, Black people cannot change this by themselves. This has to be a
Mm-mm.
collective conversation that we can all come into the container. So how
Mhm.
can we as Anglos begin to invite that space of healing into the circle of our life?
So I think that just being aware that this is happening is a powerful first step, and action is an even more powerful next step. So what can that action look like? We're talking about structural change is ultimately what we need at the level of the police and law enforcement. And so getting familiar with how our criminal justice system works and systematically exterminates people of color and specifically Black people is really important. The way that our legal system is set up, it's not really set up for victims to prevail. It's not set up for police to be held accountable. And that's something that ultimately we need to put more checks and balances there. So at the level of the district attorney, that is a powerful relationship that needs to be reevaluated in terms of how they interact with the police. We also need to look at qualified immunity as another point of intervention when it comes to people who are able to survive an altercation but have still been somehow victimized. We need to make it a lot easier for them to pursue justice. The system in a lot of ways is set up more for those who have violated the law than those who have been victimized by it. Our system is innocent until proven guilty, and that sounds like it's like a really good thing, and it is. But the problem is that there's so much burden of proof that has to go on the side of the victim or the people who are left, with the fallout before anyone can be brought to justice. And that's something that we have to be able to make that a bit more accessible. Like even things as it relates to financial provision and access for being able to bring cases. A lot of time people can't even get to the starting line of of the things that they need to get done if it's not like just a clean out, like someone has lost their life. If it is something like a brutalization, then you might get dismissed as like a civil dispute. If you get dismissed as a civil dispute, well, now you end up needing to have a retainer upwards of $5,000, $10,000 before you can even get to the starting line, and that doesn't even take into account lawsuits. But how about we even think about like, okay, well, how can we get it to the point where we don't have to have these conversations? How can we get it to the point where we don't have to have lawsuits and funerals and all of this? Certainly the police in their own right, they need mental health support and additional training on de-escalation. But the
So I
community
just want to
also.
stop you right there on the police. So there's a couple things that
Hmm.
people don't understand about the police. Like the amount of
Hmm.
training they receive is less
Hmm.
than 6 months. So it's
Correct.
longer to be a nail tech, right? Get your nails
Yeah.
done, than it is to be an enforcement officer. So
Hmm.
also a lot of the people who are police people are people who are coming out of the military, who have
Right.
been in high stress situations, who are suffering from PTSD, who are not allowed to use cannabis as a tool to reduce that effect. So we
Hmm.
have these high charged youngsters that have no training in de-escalation. Now that's a really Keisha word, because if you're already in a heightened state because you're afraid for your life, because let's tell the truth, it's scary to be a cop. I don't want to take
Hmm.
anything away from
Hmm.
cops. People who are cops, they literally deal with their life every single day. So
Hmm.
you're stepping into a situation where it's very possible you can get killed. You're not going to come in all butterflies and rainbows. You're going to come in, armored up.
Hmm.
And then you have somebody who is on drugs or mentally ill and just out of their body completely, not even in a place where you can get them to cooperate because they're just not intact in themselves.
Hmm.
What do? Of course, you escalate that. If you do not
Yeah.
know how to de escalate that, you of course escalate it, because if
Hmm.
something's big, you want to get bigger to contain it. So
Hmm.
without, I feel that our police need a whole lot more support and training.
They do. They definitely do need a lot more support and training. And when I say support and training, it's important that that doesn't get mistaken as like, the kind of rhetoric that comes out of the Blue Lives Matter camp. Because what ultimately happens with that is that the Blue Lives Matter response is often used as a way to invalidate the Black Lives Matter perspective, and the fact that, there are Black people that are getting disproportionately killed and brutalized by police. When Black Lives Matter is elevated, it's not to say that police lives don't, it's not to say that white lives don't or anybody else's don't. It just simply means that Black lives matter too, not that Black lives matter more. So back on the topic of the police. Yes, police do need that mental health support. They do need that training. They also need to be in their communities and be able to like have meaningful engagement, so that they can also get a better sense of like, what is a situation that's worthy of that kind of high level escalation. What are the normal happenings and who are the normal folks that are within their communities? They're not typically often even in the communities in which they serve. They don't look like the communities in which they serve. Then when you have, a situation for the community itself, we need resources going towards community reinvestment. We need, mental health support even in the community. When you think about why does crime happen in the first place, to why police are called, they're often called because of, some crime that was related to someone trying to gain more resources for themselves, or, at the underpinning of it, some kind of a mental health, or crimes of passion type of a situation. Those are like the two main reasons that crime occurs. So when people are saying defund the police, they're not necessarily making an attack on the police. What they're saying is that if we can take some of the budget that typically is constantly being reallocated to the enforcement of crime, and instead move some of that towards preventative measures and making communities more stable in and of themselves, to where we don't need so much enforcement. Then ultimately we would have a more sustainable system, because ultimately it's not going to do us any good if we're constantly militarizing the police to combat mental health issues or crimes of poverty. That's
Yeah.
ultimately, not going to
And I
do
think
very
that
much.
people don't understand that that's what's happening, militarizing the police. That's what's
Hmm.
happening in Portland. That's what's happening with all of the protests. Is that, these are already volatile situations, and then we're bringing the National Guard in. Okay,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
in no way is that de-escalation. In no way.
Correct.
And then we
Right.
have, the leader of our country just put up this big giant fence around the White House to create more exclusion, right? To say
Hmm.
more
Hmm.
fear, more fear,
Hmm.
fear, fear, fear. So the thing about fear is the way that it works in our brain, right? The way that the receptors respond. And as soon as we are in fight or flight, we're usually in fight. Everybody is an enemy. So there isn't a way for us to be like, oh, he's not an enemy. He's cool. No, you're all the enemy, and you're all
Hmm.
coming for me, especially if
Hmm.
you are mentally ill. So as a solution based, like, I'm all about solutions. We can just sit here and go on for hours about the problems that we have in our community, but what can we as individuals, because I'm not a fan of the great white hope either. It's nobody's job to save anybody. This is all about personal accountability, personal responsibility. The way that we move through the world personally dictates the response that we have from others. So
Hmm.
what are some things that people can just be aware of, when
Hmm.
they're dealing with people of color? Because if
Hmm.
you have never been, there's no way you can understand what it's
Hmm.
like to be a person of color and have that experience if you have not had the experience. You cannot wrap your mind around what it's like unless you've experienced it. So how can we
Hmm.
engage some empathy in
Hmm.
everyone?
Yeah, so I think that change needs to happen at the level of the individual, at the interpersonal
Oh
level, and
yeah.
at the society level. These are all different levels of change. When we're thinking about the level of the individual, I think it's really important to understand how your reality is being constructed every day. look around, your social groups and see like how many of the people look like you, how many of people don't. Like, do you constantly keep yourself in homogenous environments? Do you allow yourself to have points of difference come into your cipher? What does your social media feed look like? Do you only have people in your feed that agree with you? Can you deal with people that don't agree with you? Do they all look like you? What are your media sources looking like? Are your media sources only the kind of sources that you agree with? Do you ever even consider the sources that you don't agree with? There is an app called All Sides that I encourage everyone to check out. What All Sides does is it presents news and it allows you to read, right, left, and center perspectives on the same issue. So you
Oh.
can start to get a sense of, what is it that everybody else is seeing? Because if you only stay in one frame of reality, we literally have multiple Americas within the United States just based off of our
Oh,
media consumption.
right. Yeah.
Okay. And that's kind of creating a de facto civil war. Like, if all you listen to and read and what have you are far right commentaries, and then you have other people that's like only looking at far left commentaries, they're being polarized as enemies. And that is becoming increasingly problematic. Like, we need to be able to see what other people are consuming because of the way that our media is structured. Our media is owned by like a few kind of organizations, and even within that, if you think about like your social media feeds, like it's really much about choice and what you want to consume.
It's an
It's not.
algorithm that you
It's an
begin to
algorithm.
create, and then the algorithm, like the great algorithm of the sky,
Hmm.
picks up
Hmm.
on what you like, and then it
That's it.
only brings you what you like.
That's it. And that creates confirmation bias. So what confirmation bias is ultimately, you basically will take in the information that you agree with, and then you reject that information that you don't. So the things that you agree with, you perceive are true. And the things that you don't agree with, you perceive as fake news or trash or garbage or like not a credible source, or what have you. You have to broaden those sources and welcome dissent in your consumption, or else you're going to end up being like in such a polarized framework that you're not going to be able to have connection and community with other people. I think also being able to confront your own unconscious bias. So there is an unconscious bias test online. It's on a, if you Google unconscious bias test Harvard University, there is a unconscious bias test that you can take, and it'll take you through like a little quiz, and you'll have to answer it like really fast, and it'll show you what your biases are. Like, I recommend you taking the race bias test. You'll be able to see straight away, do you have a bias towards white people? Do you have a bias towards black people, or anything in between? Now, don't be surprised if sometimes you get like results that you don't expect, or results that you don't agree with. It's not uncommon even for Black people to have unconscious bias towards white people. That would be what we would consider like an internalized racism.
Oh, and I want to talk about that for a minute, because
Yeah.
there's so much of that just within the
Hmm.
communities of color, within the even in Anglo communities, this internal racism, and that we all live with, like
Yeah.
like the what is the quintessential thing that the media has told us? Whoopi Goldberg did this, in the 80s. It was so great. My long blonde hair, where she took a sheet and she or a shirt and she whipped it over her head, and talked about her long blonde locks. I
Hmm.
wanted to be that I wanted to be tall, skinny, blonde. I wanted that so badly. I grew up in Southern California. I had this dark, this mother of color, this father of like whatever, and
Hmm.
here I was in this community where everyone around me was white Anglo-Saxon. They were all taller and skinnier, and I was called all kinds of names growing up. I was
Hmm.
bullied really
Hmm.
badly, and here I am with my light eyes and my light skin, not under, but still feeling so inferior because
Hmm.
I'm not a willow.
Hmm.
I wasn't like wispy and whatever.
Hmm.
So if
Hmm.
that's happening
Yeah.
for me, imagine what it's like for like a girl like Tiffany, for Dr.
Yeah.
Bowden to grow up in the same, let's say we went to the same school. Okay. Let's say we
Hmm.
went to the same
Hmm.
school. I'm having this experience with, Buffy. How's that reflecting on her? And let's say she's the smartest girl in the class. Okay. So
Hmm.
here's Tiffany, smartest girl in the class, getting straight A's, and beautiful, right? I'm sure you were not exalted for all of that
Mhm.
greatness.
Oh no, no, no. I mean, and what you're ultimately saying is that you simply want it to belong.
Oh,
Because
right,
that's where that's what the root is. It's like
right.
as kids, we don't, we don't have any kind of a meaning for difference. Like we celebrate
Right.
difference. We love it. Like we have, all these crayons in the crayon box. We can't wait to play with them. We have all these friends that just like look different. We have like dolls that are purple. We got all kinds of like, random things that are going on, and that is a very colorful and exciting world to live in. It's not really until later when adults teach us that yes, that there is difference and there's a valuation and hierarchy to that difference that things become a problem. And it's natural for kids and for human beings to want to be included and and to want to feel safe,
Yeah.
and you learn very quickly, okay, well, what do I need to be so that I can be that? And if that means that I need to be white, if it means that I need to have blonde hair, if it means I need to be thin, whatever, then those are the things that you start to aspire to want to be. And that can start to have some, to wreak some havoc on you mentally. There is a study that I will say is online, so you can just like go to YouTube and search it. It's a doll test, and so what in the test that you'll see is like these little kids that are asking, which doll is the kind doll, which doll is the nice doll, like which doll is the smart doll, and you'll see time and again, they will choose the white doll for all the positive things, and which is the ugly doll. They'll choose the black doll every time, and this doesn't matter if they're black kids or white kids. They all choose very much the same way. This was the test that was used, for the Brown versus Board of Education to prove that that schools were separate but not equal, and the damage that was being done. And they continue to do these studies, and they continue to get the same results. It is diminishing, where you are starting to see more black kids choosing black dolls as beautiful, as smart, and all of that. But
And that's because their
still,
parents are giving them black dolls and they're getting
correct.
created, and they're
Yes,
getting
exactly,
created. So there were,
exactly.
when did Black Barbie come around? Not until like way into the 80s, I think. I don't think that she showed up until the 80s.
Yeah, it is. But then it's also, it'll be a situation of, the black Barbie is the sidekick Barbie. The black
Right.
Barbie is also comes in, is
She's
the accessory.
the sidekick Barbie.
Nobody wants.
She's got the Ford, not the Corvette.
Yeah, yeah. Nobody wants the, like, as a black kid, you don't want the black Barbie. Like if Barbie, the white girl, is the center of attention, Barbie's got
Right.
all the sauce. Like
Right.
She's got everything. She's got the Barbie house. Oh my God.
Right. A
You
Barbie van.
know
And we're joking
what?
around about Barbie, but Barbie's a really big icon in our culture. And
Hmm.
she dictates a lot of stuff for us,
Yeah. Hmm.
not just as women, but as a race of people as well, because she's telling the truth right here. Black
Hmm.
Barbie, Malibu Barbie, tan Barbie, all they got was
Hmm.
like the surfboard or the
Right.
friend stuff. They're not getting the condo. They didn't get the
Mm-mm.
job, you know.
Mm-mm. They don't get anything. And it's like, if you go back and you watch like those commercials from the 80s, the entire commercial will be about the white Barbie. And at the end, it'll show the black Barbie in frame and like all the other random accessories or what it also comes in. Like
Mhm.
Black Barbie was never a centerpiece, and it was never like an equal. It was just like, okay, we also made this for y'all. Like it
Right.
was,
You can get one of these too.
you got one
Bargain
too. I mean,
basement bin.
whatever, we'll take your
Yeah.
money.
Yeah, exactly. So you work with Amazon, and
Hmm.
that is I was, like I said, I saw your post last night that you're having this conversation within the community of Amazon,
Hmm.
and does that look like there's more opportunity for people of color in that job
Oh
thing?
yeah. Oh gosh. I mean, so Amazon has actually been leading the pack when it comes to this, and Amazon doesn't get a lot of credit for its efforts. And that Amazon is actually 24% Black, and people don't really actually know that. Whereas if
And
you
that's a
look at
lot.
the,
That's a lot
that's a
for a
lot.
Fortune 500
Oh
company.
yeah.
It's
Well, it's a
tremendous.
lot in general. Actually, Black people are kind of overrepresented in a sense at Amazon, in a sense that Black people are only 13% of the population. And when you think
Wow.
about other companies like Apple or Google, Microsoft, they're generally between 0 and 4%. I think that the highest is about 4% for like the other tech companies.
So you just said something
Yeah.
really interesting that Black people are only 13% of the
Mhm.
population.
Mhm.
Like I really want that just to register with people. We're talking about
Mhm.
like a really small minority of people who have a really high level of death. All right.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that alone makes it massively disproportionate.
Yeah, and I think that when we have that disproportionate conversation, sometimes it kind of makes me wonder what's going on with our education system, because I don't think that a lot of people understand, proportions
Right.
in math and those types of things, because the conversation will very quickly get derailed to how many white people versus how many black people are getting killed. And naturally, if you're going to have a brutality problem, you're going to have more white people who are getting killed in terms of raw numbers. But that's also because white people make up a larger portion of the population. So, but what's happening though is
Oh
that
wait,
you
I'm
have
sorry, but
more.
however, a 17-year-old white male walked into a crowd with an
Mm,
AK, with a semi-automatic gun, shot people, and
hmm.
didn't get arrested immediately.
Exactly.
Now,
Yeah,
if that had,
exactly.
yeah, so like
Exactly.
seriously, like if that had been my grandson or my life partner, they would have been dead
On
minutes,
site. On
on
site.
sight, on sight,
Hmm.
black man gun, and there wasn't
Yeah.
there a little boy that was killed with a toy gun.
Yes, Tamir Rice. He got
Yeah.
killed with the toy gun. So like, so that's kind of the other thing, right? So a lot of times, the comment of, if black people would just obey the law, if they just would not resist arrest,
Just obey the
then
law.
exactly. So they would just, basically, if you act right, you won't get shot, kind
Right.
of situation.
And that is exactly what you're told when you're a little kid and you're grown up in a black home. Act right. What
That's
does that
it.
mean?
Act
Don't
right.
speak. Keep your head
Right.
down. Move away. Don't make
Exactly.
waves. Don't ask for what you need. Do you guys like? I
Hmm.
really want people of not like the Anglo nation to understand that this is systemic. This doesn't
Hmm.
start at 17, 18, 21 years old. This is not a result of gang banging. This is a result of disproportionate diversity, like, and not even diversity, what's the word? Separation at a
Hmm.
very
Hmm.
early age. Very
Hmm.
early age.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And when you're taught not
Absolutely.
to speak for yourself, you do not know how to speak for yourself when the
Hmm.
situation arises where you need to.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we're often policed in our homes. We are taught to be overly obedient. So like the commentary about, oh, if black people were obedient, then they would not have these kinds of altercations. Like you could ask any black person like quotes from their black moms. They will
Right.
round
I
down.
think there's
Don't
like a whole
touch
bunch of
nothing.
memes about
Don't
it.
say
What will
nothing.
get your
Don't
ass
buy
beat?
nothing.
And why is your mom beating your ass? Because when you step out into the world and get your
Exactly.
ass beaten, you know how to take a beating.
Exactly.
And that
So,
is what one of my dear friends told me, verbatim, her
yeah,
words.
yeah, or you know how to avoid one because you so thoroughly know how to police yourself that you won't have
Oh.
to have these altercations with the police. Now, but when you do have these altercations with the police, you're treated differently, disproportionately differently. Now, I think that, some of the things that might help for the white people that are listening is to like really get a sense of like what an experience is like, and to like put a face and an experience to these interactions. So I can, kind of walk you through some of my interactions with the police. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Now let me just express this. I grew up in, private schools, white neighborhoods. We've already discussed that I'm a PhD. I have a master's degree. I've had, a two-parent home. I had a loving father. My parents were, married. They taught me, good ethics. Went to Christian schools and all of that. Okay. So this is just like some of the background and frame to kind of set the stage. All right. So because of the schools that I went to, my first interactions with the police were through DARE officers, like the DARE officers that come to the schools. And, because I was in white schools, the DARE officers were like our friends. So I was just like, oh, okay, the police officers are like our friends, and they've got these cute dogs, and we feed them snacks, and And that's how that's how things were at school. Okay, things didn't change for me until I got a driver's license and I had to start having my own independent interactions with police away from my peers at my white school. And then I remember I had an SUV at one point. I got pulled over. I wasn't driving over the speed limit or anything. I just had a truck that they apparently didn't think that I should be driving. They asked me a bunch of questions about the truck, and I was like, "It's my truck." And they, were asking me how did I get it, and all this stuff. And I'm a kid. I don't know that I don't have to answer these questions. They tell me to get out of the car. They want to search it, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, no problem." Sure. I mean,
No problem, officer.
What are you looking
Yeah.
for?
Right,
you know?
exactly.
And I'm like, I'm a little goofy kid. So they start like, throwing my stuff out on the ground. I'm like, this is rude. Like, this is like,
Right. You're like,
in
something's wrong.
my mind, I'm like, why is he doing this? Like, who raised you? Like, why would you do this? So he's like throwing all of my stuff on the ground, looking for whatever he's looking for, rips up my panels on the sides of my car. I didn't even know that they could be removed. And I was like, what is he even doing? And then he left all the stuff like that on the ground. I was like, what in the world? I had another interaction, like when I moved to California, and I decided I wanted to go to Manhattan Beach because I just wanted to enjoy my little beach day or whatever. So we were pulling in. It was like a little parking area where you know how like when you go to like in a parking space where like one side of it is like it's going in one direction, the other side has to go another way. You can only get in one way or another. So the guy was waiting on the right side, and I pulled around and I started waiting on the left side. Somebody came out of a parking space on the left side, which is where I was. So I pulled into the parking space, which was a metered parking space. Next thing I know, I'm hearing banging on my window from this gentleman that was waiting in the parking space on the other side. And he was just like, that's my parking space. And I was like, excuse me? And I was like confused because I'm like, did I pull into a reserved spot? Like I'm looking around and I'm like, no, this is definitely a metered spot. So
Oh, I remember
no.
this. I remember this story. This crazy person in the Jeep, right? Who
Yeah,
like
that's
just went
it.
after you. Like it was insane. This guy was insane.
He was insane. And he said, if you don't get your ass out of that car, I'm going to deflate your tires. And I was like, oh, well, if you do that, I'm going to call the police. And he starts deflating my tires. And these like two white ladies got out the Jeep with them to help him. And they were all just deflating my tires. And I'm sitting in my car. Now I'm sitting in my car because I'm terrified to get out and deal with these
Right.
crazy
I'm
people.
sure. I'm sure.
I don't know what's going on. So I called the police and I tell them, this guy is over here deflating my tires and he's screaming at me, come. All right, the police come. The police come up on scene and they're running. They got guns on holster and they're looking all erratic and crazy. And they come over to my car and like looking at me. And then I'm like, Jesus, like what's going on? And I'm like, Jesus. And then the police was like, we heard that there was a weapon on site. And I was like, a weapon? There's no weapon. There's no
You're
weapon
the weapon.
on site.
You.
Right. Like,
there. Black
what
female.
you talking about?
Weapon.
Right. I was like, weapon? They was like, yeah, somebody was deflating your tires. We heard there might be a knife on site. No, he just was unscrewing the caps and deflating the air and doing whatever he did. There was no knife involved. Like I don't know why they in their mind thought that there was a weapon on site, but they started just acting erratic. So once they felt that there was no weapon, they took their hands off their holsters. Then they decided to go and talk to the guy who deflated my tires first, who had told me he was going to wait for the police, because he was going to talk to him. So they went over and they talked to him. Then they came back over and talked to me, asked for my version of what happened, which was inappropriate because they're supposed to ask the person who called first. And then they lectured me. They said, well, if you don't do anything to him, he won't do anything to you, that kind
You're
of
like,
thing.
my tires are flat. Something's already been done to me. Yeah.
I was like, what? Mm-hmm. Like, why am I being lectured? I have called you. Okay, fine. So they say, all right, they give me their card and I'm like, okay, cool. The next day I'm just shaking and I'm irritated and I'm like, okay, I think I want to press charges. I call and I say, I want a copy of my police report. Come to find out they didn't file a police report. I'm like, what do you mean there's no report? They said that there was no report. I said, well, I want to make a report. they said, well, we won't take one over the phone. So I have to drive all the way across, like, I don't know, 45 minutes to go back to Manhattan Beach to make an in-person police report. And it mattered to me, so I did that thing. So I went over there and I sat there and they just looking at me like I'm crazy. And they said that they didn't have any record of this event. And I was like, well, you see this? This is my call history. This is when I called 911. They tried to say I didn't call. And I was
Wow.
like, oh no, you guys are crazy. So finally, they took down the notes and there was just like a lot of smirks that were going on. And I was just like, okay, I don't know what the hell's so funny, but fine, we'll have this conversation. And this is what happened. So, I go away. A couple of days later, I get a call from a detective who says that, we can take this report, but nothing's going to happen. It's just going to get thrown out in court. And I was like, all right, well, let's let that chance happen. I just want to document it. Go ahead and take the report. The guy, the guy called me back later. He reiterated the same thing. I was like, and as I stated, I still want to do the report. You said that there should be, there should be cameras. There should be something. I had to go and source my own security footage from the local bars and from, the local restaurants to try to get some kind of view or visual of what was going on, because police wouldn't do their job. It clearly showed the man aggressing me. And then they said, oh, well, it's very granular and it's grainy and you can't really see exactly what's going on. You can't see if he has anything in his hand. You can't actually see, how, what's going on. I was like, you can see that this man is
You can't
walking
see
up
him
to
bend
my
down and
car.
let the air out of the tires.
Right.
Yeah,
Like you
oh,
can't
you can't
see.
see that.
Like you can't see that this video confirms exactly what I've said. You don't hear the audio from the 911 call of me screaming because these people are being extra. Okay, so they said that they weren't going to take the report, and I said I'm gonna need you to just take the report. You can go ahead and take the report, and if the DA doesn't want to pick it up, then whatever. They say that the DA doesn't want them to write a report unless it's a lockdown case and like all the evidence and the details are tied up. And I was like, well, that doesn't really make any sense because that's not how our legal system works. You're
Right. Well,
supposed to take a report,
right. And
and
that's how
if
we create the case. Yeah.
that's it, right? I was like, that you're supposed to take the report, and the judge is supposed to be the one to find out if the evidence makes any sense. And they tried to act like I was stupid, and they were just like, the police chief calls me. I was like, dang, the police chief is
Wow.
involved. The police chief calls me, and he reiterates the same thing, that he's been there for 30 years and he's not doing the report because it's just gonna get thrown out. And I was just like, okay, cool, whatever. So, and he says that it's the DA's fault. So I was like, all right, fine. If y'all keep saying the same thing, I'm just gonna call the DA myself. So I called and left the DA a message, and I also sent an email detailing like that I was just really disappointed with this policy that is apparently present from the DA. And the DA called me back. It was Jackie Lacey, who was a Black woman in California, calls me back appalled that the police said that they have some policy that they can't take these stories down or these reports down without like lockdown evidence. And she said that she owes it to me as a citizen to let me know that that is not how things are supposed to go. And then she instructed me to just sit tight because she is going to contact them herself and make sure that I get a report filed. And she asked me if I had a picture of the person's license plate. And I said, oh yeah, sure. Because you know why? Because Black people, when we're in these situations, we always have these heightened senses of awareness. And I was my own detective. And I was like, matter of fact, I
Yeah,
got
you had to
his
be.
license plate. I got his picture. I got these ladies' pictures. I got pictures of my parking space, pictures of tires. That was my whole detective, whatever. She's like, okay, great. So the next day, I get a call from some other random person at the police office, like, oh, hi, Miss N. We heard that you're wanting to file a police report. And I was like, yeah, I'm trying to file that police report that I contacted you about 20 times, okay?
Right.
So they say, okay. And so then the police chief calls me again, after all this, and says, I already told you this is going to get thrown out. And I was like, and as Jackie Lacey told you, go ahead and take my report and we'll see, okay? That's it. That's all I asked you to do. So he's huffing and puffing, and he finally takes this report down. And so maybe like about a month later, I get a letter to my house saying that this guy's being brought up on charges and he's actually going to have to go to court. And I was like, all right, now we're getting somewhere. At this point, I'm just trying to write it out for justice. And you know, I get to the court and this man is nowhere to be found. And I was like, did he just no show for this court case? What's going on? No, he made some kind of a deal before he even got to court, didn't have to show. And he ended up getting anger management classes is
Oh.
what
Mm-hmm.
the he got anger management classes. But if it were like imagine if this was a black man who was just out there attacking some white lady and
Right, that's what
deflating
I'm
her
saying.
tires.
I'm like, come on, we're talking about a parking space, and this is how much you had to do. Now,
This is it.
imagine if you're a black woman being attacked by like a white crackhead, okay? And you try to. I've been watching this TV show, and I highly recommend everybody watch it. Called Pose. It is on Netflix. It is about the 80s and the early 90s, the transgender club scene, and AIDS and the AIDS epidemic. And
Mm-hmm.
it is there is so much racism in the police department. There is so much categorization on
Mm-hmm.
human beings. There is so much like, oh, you're not worth anything anyway. Okay, so if you're a black gay youth, right, you're forget it.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter what
Mm-hmm.
happens to you. Doesn't matter.
No,
And if you're
no.
just like, and here you are, you're basically from a middle class background for all intents and purposes,
Mm-hmm.
and because you have your education and because you have your foundation, you're able to go through all that you did just for a parking space, right? I mean, like, and
Mm-hmm.
when we think about the topic that we're talking about, it's ludicrous how much
Mm-hmm.
effort and energy you had to put into something that ended up being like, oh, well, you just go to anger management. Now, if it had been reversed
Mm-hmm.
and you had like let the tires out of his, like the air out of his tires,
I'd have
forget
left in
about it.
cuffs.
They would have
I would
been
have left in
cuffed. They
cuffs.
would have
And
arrested you.
well,
Yeah,
first of all, they arrived on site thinking that there was a weapon on site. Okay,
right.
if that was a black man that was deflating tires and the police arrived thinking there was a weapon on site, they might have possibly shot them and been justified saying, oh, we feared for our life and we heard that there was a weapon on scene. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? That's how these things happen. Like they can get away with killing people and to say that they were afraid and that they heard that there was a weapon and that they made a judgment call. And then the populace will basically say, well, the police jobs are dangerous,
They are so
they're in a
dangerous. Yes,
heightened,
exactly. Mm-hmm.
it's a heightened state, that they're in, and they'll have all the empathy for the police and all that. But it's like you have to understand like the situation, like I could have been killed,
Right, right,
for going to the
exactly.
beach. For
Yeah,
going
for
to the
going to the
beach.
beach and just pulling into a parking spot. And I had an experience a long 150 years ago. I was a manager at a pool called in the Rose Bowl. And it was right when the gang stuff started really kind of coming as the 80s. So like, Crips and Blood, super whatever. And this is like kind of like their home base was this park and it was real separated. And so I made the pool a neutral territory by getting the DJ to spin records and making everybody like check their shit before they came onto the pool deck. And it went really well for most of the summer until one day, one guy decided that he didn't, like the rules and he jumped off the high dive in a way and I called him out on it. And he showed up behind me with a gun to my head. Now I was 18 years old and this guy's holding a gun to my head. And, he was a big, scary black guy for sure. He was super scary,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And so somebody called it in, but they called it in wrong. They called it in as a riot. All right. So when the Pasadena police, so I like just was like, okay, dude, it's cool. You jumped off the high dive. I don't care. Go ahead. Do it again. It ain't worth my life. I don't care how you dive. I just didn't want you to break your spine. That's all. That's the reason why I said that. I didn't want you to be whatever. And he was high on drugs, and there was a lot of external situations that were going on besides the color of his skin. So when
Right.
the police showed up, because it was called in as a riot, and they saw that the pool deck was just covered in dark skin, they said, "Oh, it's called in wrong. We're going to leave." And they left. They left. They
Oh
left
my
everybody.
gosh.
Now, this could have been a situation. Now, it was really the way that it was handled in my life was a super beautiful thing because one of the guys that was working for me was able to disarm the guy, get the gun, and kick his ass out. So by the time the police even showed up, the predator was already off the scene, right? But the part that stuck with me for the rest of my life, because I was under 20 when this happened, was the fact that the way that it was called in, the fact that there were Anglo cops that showed up and they left because they didn't like the way that it was called in. And the truth was that they were scared to death and they didn't care. They didn't
Mm-hmm.
care. If that had opened fire and they had gunned down the 50 to 100 people that were on the pool deck, it would have been
Mm-hmm.
no loss to anyone. It was a ghetto
Mm-hmm.
pool full of ghetto people.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
have like never gotten past that part in my
Mm-hmm.
life. The gun to my head part, like that for some reason didn't seem to bother me as much as the fact that it was the way that the justice was served,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Well, it's that's the thing. It's like I think that within law enforcement, there's a certain kind of a culture for protocol, and they tend to emphasize protocol more than life itself.
Oh,
So it's
right.
law, order, protocol, obedience, and those are the things that matter. Rather than actual human life, and that shows up in different ways. That's just another articulation of that. So it's really unfortunate kind of how that plays out.
So we're just getting ready to wrap this up, Tiff, and I appreciate you so much, Dr. Bowden. And I really
Mhm.
want everyone who's listening, to share this so we can all have this conversation on Facebook and everybody can get it, and then to follow this brilliant woman so we can all like just level up. We all just need to level up, and it is our job. We are the keepers of this planet. We are the keepers of the children, and we are the guardians of our elders. So if you are somewhere between 20 and 60, it is your job as a carbon-based being to take care of your community. So what can you say, like what can you leave us with that we can, you know, help ourselves, like first of all, don't be scared of people because they're dark,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
don't be scared just because like well, I see this a lot of times. There's like, just a black man walking down the street and everyone's like locking their doors, right? Like you
Mhm.
don't know.
Mhm.
This guy could be like a brain surgeon. You don't
Mhm.
know their situation. And the white guy with the blue eyes and the super awesome body, he might be the murderer. You don't
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
So how can we as humans move about the cabin basically with benevolent compassion for one another and a deeper understanding that just because we both have two legs does not mean that we have the same experience.
Yeah, absolutely. We certainly don't have the same experience. And if you guys want to follow me, I'll say that my Instagram is like where I post educational topics. It's at Rooted Goddess on Instagram. And the first thing I would also say is that in order to have compassion for anyone else, like you have to have compassion for
Oh,
yourself. And the way that you have compassion for yourself is that you get a better understanding of racism, of unconscious bias, of privilege, and you own those things. And when you own those things, you don't make it mean that you're a bad person. You are living in a container that has socialized you in a certain kind of way, and it has trained you to have blind spots. So once you can really own that, then you can really have compassion for other people's blind spots. Within the spiritual community, they may refer them as shadows. We have
oh,
a
right.
community shadow. Okay, so it basically means doing your shadow work. It means as an individual including that scope of dealing with that conversation as it relates to race and racism, and truly owning those things and integrating those things within the self so that you know how to move. Like your brain is a wonderful machine. It's a beautiful gift, but what its job is to do is to simplify the world for you. And one of those things that simplifies is other human beings. Like if your brain had to figure out every single time that you saw a chair what to do with it, you would short circuit. And in the same way, as you interact with other human beings, it tries to make those shortcuts and it tries to help you navigate space to save you and to protect you. But sometimes you need to feed your brain more information with intention. And the way that you can do that is by interacting with other human beings, interacting with things that you don't readily agree with, or things that you're
Oh,
not
making
necessarily
yourself
going to see.
uncomfortable, putting
That's it.
yourself in an uncomfortable situation where you have the opportunity to expand into the situation.
That's
I
right.
like to tell
And create
people,
that.
yeah, we change our underwear. Okay. We don't change ourselves. We change our underwear. We expand into a higher
Expand.
level of
Yes.
consciousness. And that is what Firebird is really about, is expanding
Hmm.
and authenticating who we are. So,
That's it.
the real truth is that we're all carbon-based beings. We all have red blood, black pupils, white bones, and yellow marrow. There is
Hmm.
only one race, that is the human race. We're not separate races. You know, Tiffany doesn't come from a different planet than I do. You know, we are all human beings. If you peel
That's
our
it.
skin and you just look at us as a cellular system, we look exactly the same. So the way
Mm-hmm.
that we find unity with one another is in that understanding that we are the
Yeah.
same and different. And it is
Yes.
our
Yes.
differences that really give us power. It's our differences that really give us beauty. And when you engage with people who are different than you, they reflect back on you a level of your beauty that you don't know
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
because you've
And you
never
can
seen it.
hold that. Yeah, and you can hold that human connection and that space for humanity and the things that all make us the same and united, as well as own the fact that we are all living in a different experience, even if that's a
Oh,
manufactured experience.
right.
And we have to work to get back, to get to that space of actual unity. But you can't do that if you just completely deny the fact that we are living in
Exactly.
different realities.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's where benevolent compassion comes in. When I can look at another person and say, you know, I don't know anything about their history. I don't
Hmm.
even know where they came. Like sometimes because I work in oncology, you know, mostly now, I'll go to a situation and I'll look around the room and I'll start thinking how many people in that room are living with a debilitating disease. How many
Hmm.
people are fighting for their life just in that moment. And when you
Hmm.
start seeing people from this place of like, wow, what exactly are you going through? Because I don't
Hmm.
know. It creates a compassion inside of yourself that follows into an understanding. And then we're
Hmm.
just immediately in a different place with another person. So I'd like to
Hmm.
encourage all of you to open yourself up to understanding that you don't know everything about everybody else and that your life experience is not theirs.
That's it.
And
And
that
that
if you
takes
just
a great deal of humility.
yes, humility. And that is like, you know, the most powerful people in the world are the most humble. You know, the Dalai
Hmm.
Lama does not get up in front of people and go, I'm so bitchin'. You know, I don't think he has ever said that out loud. You know, he is
Hmm.
always saying, I am striving, I am working towards, I am creating the space of. And that is what
Hmm.
we are all trying to do. So,
Hmm.
Tiffany, I absolutely adore you. You know, I'm a huge fan of yours. It's so nice
Thank
to
you.
that you gave us this super early morning time. I appreciate it. You know, 7 a.m. I woke up at 6 o'clock. I was like, it'll be okay. Okay. You know, a couple cups of
No
coffee later, I'm
worries.
like, woo, let's go. Right. So all of you, Haley is awesome as well. Haley is, you know, the driver behind Firebird, and all of the
Okay.
links that Tiffany has said, the assessments, ways to follow her, they are all inside of this feed. So thank
Mhm.
you so much, excuse me, for your time and anything you wanted to say in closing.
I know. I just want to thank you all for getting up this morning and having this powerful conversation. It's certainly a first step into your self awareness and awakening in this topic. Continue it. Do the uncomfortable things. Do the hard things, and do this after it's not trending anymore.
Oh, right on. Okay, y'all have a good day. Do something fun and be compassionate to yourself, life, and others.
Yes,
See you
absolutely.
later. Bye.
Bye.